Hey everyone, it's Richard Metal Fan here, bringing you guys a brand new 2021 album review. And today we're going to be talking about the new album from my good friends in Cradle of Filth entitled Existence is Futile, which is out now through Nuclear Blast Records. Now, obviously, I don't really need to talk much about Cradle of Filth. I'm pretty sure a lot of you probably know who they are. These guys been around since the early 90s. One of my favorite bands. I've seen them live 4 times. I pretty much dig a lot of these guys' stuff, pretty much going from like their debut full-length album, The Principle of Evil Made Flesh, to Cruelty and the Beast, which in my opinion is still probably my favorite album of theirs. Like other great albums like Midian, Nymphetamine, and even like their more recent albums like Hammer of the Witches, Cryptoriana, the Decay, their last album, to this album. And these guys have like so many different lineup changes. Like their only original member is of course the one and only Danny Filth, and he's just one, in my opinion, one of my favorite vocalists. And this overall is the band's 13th full-length album, following up their previous album, Cryptoriana, The Sickness and Decay, which was one of my favorite albums of 2017. And here we are 4 years later with the release of their new album, Existence is Futile. Does it kind of live up or exceed what Cryptoriana has? In my honest opinion, I think it probably has. Like, I feel like every album Cradle of Filth has done, I feel like they've just, like, you could definitely tell it's still Cradle of Filth. Like, if you play me like a few 30 seconds of a song, I could tell like that's off of Cruelty and the Beast or Midian or Nymphetamine or style albums like that. So they definitely have that style, but they could definitely tell they try to experiment a little bit. And a lot of people would consider Cradle of Filth black metal. I mean, they definitely have like the tendencies a little bit musically and a little bit vocally, but I feel like they more on the lines of like extreme metal, or even have some gothic elements into their sound. The production on this album is really great. I think Cradle of Filth always has great production. The vocals, like, I don't even know how Danny Filth does it. Like, he still sounds the same as he does in the 90s. Like, he does, like, that really kind of, like, mid, kind of, like, stuff. And then when he does that high scream, shrieks, he, like, because every Cradle of Filth fan knows when Danny, if I've seen Cradle of Filth live 4 times, and when he does like high screams, he always like has it like right above his head. Like that's like every Cradle fan should know. And he does a really great job with the vocals. And the guitar work on this album is pretty tight. Like I don't even know. Like of course, Richard Shaw, aka my other me. It's just a little joke that we have since we talk on Instagram, and of course my buddy Ash Shock. Just the riffs that they come up with. It was great. Just like the leads. I feel like Cradle Filth always has like great guitar work. I mean, not dissing like previous members like Paul Allender and stuff, but I feel like Rich and Ashok just really stepped it up. Even since Hammer of the Witches, which was their first album with the band, it's really great. The bass on this album is pretty audible. You could definitely hear it more. Daniel Firth, just ever since he joined with Manicore, he's just a really great job on the bass. The keyboards, this is actually the first album with their new keyboard player, Annabelle Aratney, who replaced my good friend Lindsay Schoolcraft. And Annabelle, I was kind of was wondering who was going to replace Lindsay, and then when I saw the Cradle Filth did their live stream performance show back in May, I was kind of like, all right, she did pretty well. And when they were doing one song, I believe it was from Hammer of the Witches, I was like looking at her and be like, yeah, she's good. And of course, got to interview her, and I feel like when I did my interview with her, she said like there's like different like moments in here, and I definitely feel it with this album. They definitely have like different moments, and I feel like the keyboards really add a lot of like depth to it and melody, and Annabelle's singing on here is really great. I think she's a really great singer. And drumming wise, my buddy Martin Skarupka does a really great job with the drumming. And I think, and he's still Cradle Filth's longest running drummer, been with them since 2006 after Thornography, and he kills it with the drums. So yeah, I rambled on for 4 minutes, so let's just dive into this album track by track. Now, starting things off is the intro, The Fate of the World on Our Shoulders, which is a very dramatic orchestral intro, and I think it's the best way to start off this album, and it prepares you for something evil coming your way. Just that whole kind of like vibe, it pretty much sets the whole mood and tone for the album, and this leads into the next song, which is called Extensional Terror, and I think it's a great song. It just kicks it right from the get-go. The bass and the drums work together to give like that thunderous pounce, and the guitars have a radiant tone, and I love the duality of this beating down and airy atmosphere just weaves through it, like the song's runtime and the aura coming together. Just gives a really great triumphant presence. And then we move on to Necromantic Fantasies, which was the second single from this album. And I feel like this is something of a late career classic in the making. And this album is just littered with, no pun intended, filth. And there's like moments where Danny and the crew just weave through like the desperate elements, and they sound perfectly together with this 6-minute long just epic. Then we move on to Crawling King Chaos, now, which is the first single released from Existence is Futile. Now, this song is a much more conventional track, but in terms of like the composition and the obvious like Lovecraftian kind of subject matter, and it kind of reminds you of something from like Damnation in a Day, and it isn't that dissimilar from the rest of what Existence is Futile is. We're about to get into in a little bit, and it's a very catchy midsection in there. It's just. I don't know. It's a fucking great song, and I feel like Danny's voice. I feel like he just sounds even better than ever for on here. Then we get to Here Comes a Candle, Infernal Lullaby, which is just a little interlude. Same thing with the intro track of the album. It just gives you like a break from all the chaos, and then it just leads into the next song, which is Black Smoke Curling from the Lips of War, which continues the chaotic speed, the tempo slowing down at times to provide room for Annabelle singing to sort of like emphasize the sound of the keys on here. Next up is Discourse Between Man and His Soul, and it pretty much shows like the quiet but side of the band, and this song sort of like lives from like the vicious vocal performance, and it's in some really great guitar solos, and the keyboard sort of like invites you would sort of like great pleasure with a glass of red wine, and it just gives that kind of like spooky vibe to it. Next up is The Dying of the Embers. Now it starts off with the great voice from Annabelle, and this follows like that filthiness, and a great melody over like a fast like drum pattern gives like a almost like a little bit of a progressive touch, and Danny sort of like whispers and screams and growls, and he just tells a story from his book about like the occult fairy tales and the sound of the band. And then we get to yet another interlude, which is Ashen Mortality, which I think I just feel like this album just goes really well. I feel like the interludes, while some people would say they has a problem with it, there's too many of it, but I feel like they could have like just merged it with the song itself, but I just think it really kind of adds to it and doesn't disrupt the flow at all. And then we move on to the next song, which is called How Many Tears to Nurture a Rose. Now this just comes up very ramped, and it's just a very kind of almost playful sounding guitar rhythm in the mix, offering kind of like smooth at times, and there's also that kind of like gothic flair, which is at its best. Next up is Suffer Our Dominion, and this is one of the few songs which actually has Doug Bradley from the horror movie Hellraiser. This is the first time you heard him like on a do like narration and stuffing since Midian, and he delivers a game diatribe about Mother Nature reaping revenge on humanity for global warming, and almost kind of like gives you kind of like more context than if they were like recording before all this bullshit pandemics thing started. I feel like it has like more of a meaning now, and it's interesting to hear sort of like Cradle Filth talking about stuff like political and current as the climate change, even it coming from like that cosmic kind of like horror perspective. And this, I don't know. And then there's also like that trademark symphonics and melody sensibilities, which rendering it is by far the most interesting and successful album on the album. Next up is Us, Dark Invincible. Now it pretty much captures the album's theme as like the face of existential doom, which we must embrace it and celebrate life. It's very anthemic in its flow, and it makes it more of the upbeat songs on here, but don't assume that it's cheery. There's like blast beats and vicious sounding riffs which takes over as Danny screams and shrieks and roars, and the sound of the keys spew all over the place. Which hopefully you don't take down the wrong context, which offers like this song just offers a thrilling sensation that provides like a strength of invincibility. And this album, of course, has like 2 bonus tracks if you get the special edition, which we'll talk about right now, which is called Sisters of the Mist, which also features the voice of Doug Bradley again, but also kind of like finishes off the trilogy, which starts off with Hurt Ghost in the Fog, which is probably my favorite Cradle of Filth song, which started on their 2000 album Midian, and the second part, which was on Swan Song for Raven, which could be heard on Nymphetamine. And I feel like I don't know, just pretty much just wraps everything up right then and there. And then we close things out with Unleash the Hellion, which has fast rhythms with a great keyboard, which is, I don't know, it's a pretty interesting song. Now overall, Existence is Futile by Cradle of Filth. The buddies did it again, so if I were to give this album a score, I'm going to give Existence is Futile by Cradle of Filth a solid 8.5 out of 10. So yep, that's my review of the album, guys. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about it, and I'll see you all in the next video. And as always, keep it metal.